Actually, the founder of Nissan America, they sent him. Um, it's a really interesting story. He worked at Nissan in Japan, and he convinced them to enter a few of their cars in an Australian rally race. Yeah, Yutaka Katayama. He convinced them to enter the rally race down in Australia. It was the first time a Japanese auto company competed with non-Japanese autos in that race, and they won in their bracket. They won, and it was big news. The cool thing about it, though, is that because of their success, there was a whole lot of interest in Japan about competing with the auto giants of the rest of the world. Obviously, in America, you had Ford and you had Chevrolet, and then you had Mercedes Benz and in Europe and BMW and Ferrari and all this sort of stuff. And this was like the top tier. And Japanese autos were just not taken seriously at all until they won those races. So Nissan Japan didn't really particularly like Mr. K. They kind of banished him to America, and they were like, okay, you did a good job getting our name out there and pumping up interest in the brand. We're going to have you establish Nissan in America, and your mission is to make Nissan a viable competitor in the American market. But they did not want Mr. K to tarnish the Nissan brand, so instead of selling their cars there as Nissans, they sold them as Datsuns. That's where the Datsun brand came from. Uh, and Mr. K was a big fan of Western car culture. He was a big fan of muscle cars, which is why those Datsun cars, the 280s and whatnot, look like, old muscle cars, because he liked that. He liked the look, he liked the aggressive nature of them, and he liked the speed. Got pulled over for speeding in California all the time while he lived there.
Welcome to the Datsun and Nissan Z car story, and yes, I'm going to be saying Z a lot in this video. If you're used to hearing
We'll watch
Z,
some of this.
then
I don't know if we'll
please
watch the
bear
whole
with me
27
as
minutes.
We go on a more than 50-year journey over the life of
This guy's good, though.
car.
I love this guy's channel.
The Z cars didn't single-handedly kickstart the boom in Japanese import cars. That came from the solid reliability and good value of regular passenger cars from Japan's Big Three. And the biggest shot in the arm would come from the 1973 oil crisis and the rush to fuel economical cars. But the Z cars certainly helped, creating a halo car that showed that cheap and cheerful cars from a far-off land can be exciting as well. Over the years, the car has grown and shrunk again, but it's always stayed true to its roots. This is the Nissan Z car story.
This guy's Australian, so that's why he keeps saying Z instead of Z. Holy shit, that's loud.
Nissan started looking at sports cars in 1952 with the DC3. That didn't go so well, selling only 50. It was followed in 1959 by the S211, based on the Datsun 211. That was even less successful, selling only 20 cars. It was followed by the
I love the looks of these cars, by the way.
That sold less than 500. It seems Nissan had about as many tries in making a successful car as the king of Swamp Castle did building his castle. But eventually Nissan sports cars started selling modestly well. The first to do so was the 310, or Datsun 1500 as it was known in North America, again based on the 310 Bluebird. It was also known as the Fair Lady, a name chosen because the Nissan president saw My Fair Lady on Broadway in 1958 and thought the name evoked elegance and beauty. Nissan was exporting its
I do
cars
like that
around the
name,
world,
Fair Lady.
but only in small amounts. When they arrived in
The Fair
established
Lady
car
Z.
markets such as Europe, the USA and Australia, they didn't meet with much success. They were slow and frequently seen as sweatboxes, with engine heat and bad ventilation systems making driving uncomfortable. Enter Yutaka Katayama. He was a true autophile, having grown up around his dad's classic cars, and when he was old enough to drive, getting his own. So when it was time to get a job, he naturally sought one at Nissan, one of Japan's small but growing car companies. Yet Katayama was a square peg in a round hole. He didn't agree with Nissan's labour union practices, which got him into trouble on numerous occasions. He read of a grueling 10,000-mile motor race in Australia in 1958 and presented the idea of Nissan running one of its pedestrian but reliable cars there. Maybe Nissan could be the tortoise in the tortoise and hare fable. But he ran into resistance. Nissan, like many Japanese companies at the time, were afraid of failure and the shame that that would bring to their brand. They only agreed if Katayama would race the cars under the Datsun brand to shield the parent company. But they needn't have worried. Nissan's reliable cars meant the Datsun 100 won its class and finished 25th overall. This helped Nissan start to think about exporting more widely and maybe looking at more sporty cars. Not knowing what to do with the troublesome Katayama, Nissan packed him off to the USA to help sell cars there. Katayama threw himself into the job and embraced American culture. But in the process, he learnt about how Americans thought and, more importantly, what they wanted in a car. Although Nissan had a presence on both coasts, he decided to focus his attention on the West Coast. He managed to convince a few used car dealerships and service stations to start up as Datsun
This is why you
dealers.
can find 280s more
This was
easily in
really
California than
feat,
anywhere
as
else.
Japan's reputation at the time was of making cheap, unreliable things. Again, Nissan was worried of failure, so the Datsun name would be used outside of Japan. Katayama won the favour of the dealers as he listened to them and worked hard to get them what they wanted. However, as he still wasn't flavour of the month in Japan, often his suggestions fell flat at Nissan's headquarters. He lobbied for larger engines and larger cars, but Nissan was reluctant to make cars bigger as they would fall foul of Japan's tax laws. But his tenacity was growing Nissan's sales, and by 1965 he was made president of Nissan USA. In his new role, he went back to Japan to meet with Nissan bigwigs over the next generation of car, with the hope that it might focus a little more on North American customers. With little to no marketing budget, Katayama had been promoting Nissan through motor racing. By now, Nissan's open-top sports...
This is like, also, I mentioned this before, like the one thing that keeps me tethered to capitalism, as much as I may dislike it, is the golden era of the auto industry, both, you know, in America and Europe and also Japan. Like the idea of using motorsports to grow your brand and to act as kind of the foundation or the framework of the next body of cars that you're putting onto the road, to me is nothing short of awesome. Like, what a period of time to have lived through, particularly if you're a white person with money. Like, it sucked for non-whites in America at least, but like if you were white and had some money, a lot of money rather, that not even a lot. These cars weren't like super expensive, even adjusted for inflation. But like if you had the ability to like buy a Roadster and enjoy it, then I mean this was definitely like the golden era. Like there was so much competition amongst the auto industry, and motorsports is fun. Like I still like watching. I need to watch more races. I used to watch Speed Vision before they changed to Speed Channel, and I don't even know if that still exists anymore. But you know, wherever they hosted the World Rally Championships, those were fun as hell to watch. Got to get back into them.
Had some serious power behind them. The
That's a
Datsun
sweet car.
1500 had become the 1600 and then the 2000 with some serious grunt, up to 121 horsepower through a 5-speed gearbox. But while in Japan, Katayama lobbied for a larger engine in the 510, plus a new car, a coupe with a bit of power to compete against cars like the MGB GT. As it happens, Nissan had been working on a car similar to what Katayama wanted, headed up by designer Yoshihiko Matsuo. This project hadn't been funded by Nissan yet, but Katayama found an ally in Kechi Matsumura, a recently arrived Nissan executive. The upcoming 510 would have its bigger engine that US dealers wanted, and Katayama would have his coupe. All he had to do now was sell them in large enough quantities, or his head would be on the chopping block. Although Katayama wasn't popular in Japan, the 510's success with the larger engine provided credence that his new coupe might sell well, and so the project continued. And that new car had better sell well, because it had grown from its original design to better accommodate Americans, but that meant it would fall into Japan's higher tax bracket. Nissan was now essentially building a car to export, and for a company that was cautious about failure outside of Japan, this was a high-stakes venture. But they weren't producing cars in a bubble. Rivals Honda and Toyota were also exporting and starting to get some success and recognition. Honda had even gone racing in Formula One, winning the 1965 Mexican Grand Prix. Nissan management saw there was a future in exporting, but Katayama's direction was at odds with management. They'd previously looked at making a coupe in the mid-60s using a Yamaha engine. Toyota had released their interpretation of a sports coupe in 1966.
Look at how sweet that is,
as a
man.
2000 GT using that same Yamaha engine.
Look at how sweet that is. Look at that. That's a 66 2000 GT. Oh, man. I wonder if you could find one of those anywhere. Oh, yeah. Look at it. Like, it's such a rare car. Oh, God, look at how sweet that is. It's such a rare car that, like, if one goes for sale, it becomes like a news item in Car and Driver. Yeah, only 351 of these things produced. So God knows how much this thing's going to go for. Whoa. Wait, in previous auction, 2000 GTs have sold over 500,000, with one in 2013 going for 1.2 million. Yeah, so if you want one of these bad boys, be prepared to pony up a cool mill if you've got it. But, oh man, look at that interior. What a beautiful interior. Look at that. Look at that wood. It's so weird. When I was a kid, I thought that wood grain interior was like the lamest thing in the world. But now I look at this stuff and I'm like, oh, how beautiful. I bet that steering wheel feels awesome. Like, cars all feel so cheap and generic now because so many of them use, like, they share parts. Like, that's why I think, like, people that brag on having, like, a Maserati are so hilarious. They're like, yeah, I got a Maserati. What do you drive? And it's like, well, I drive a Chrysler, so literally the same thing you drive. Like, your doorknobs are Chrysler doorknobs, your wheels are Chrysler wheel, your gauges are Chrysler gauges. Like, everything that you interact with in your Maserati is the same as what I interact with in my Chrysler. You know, it's the exact same shit. The only difference is the engine, and yeah, the engine, yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at. But I mean, really, it's you're paying out your ass for like a jumped up Chrysler, because they use all the same fucking parts and shit. But like, this is craftsmanship. This is like specially tailored craftsmanship that you're not gonna find in any other car. And it's beautiful. It's a work of art. And man, I am jealous that I don't have one. Maseratis are trash cars, by the way. So if you ever see anybody driving them, laugh at them.
But the pricey car had failed. Nissan were concerned they were going to make the same mistake. But what they hadn't made the same mistake on was the price. The new car would be cheaper to manufacture, and Katayama himself wanted it to be a sports car that everyone could afford. The new coupe hit Japanese showrooms in 1969 and American shores in 1970, but the badge on the back wasn't to Katayama's liking. Nissan had named it the Fair Lady Z,
which I like that name.
The project name of Project Z.
I like the Fair Lady Z.
Katayama felt the name just wouldn't work in the US. All of the cars were held up from delivery until badges could be replaced with 240Z. And the story goes that Katayama took all of the Fair Lady names off the cars himself. The car was a really good deal, around the same price as the MGB GT that was already 5 years old.
What a fucking beautiful car! Oh man, look at that thing! Oh man, look at that! Look at that! I love the recessed headlights. I like circular headlights. I've come to the determination that I like circular headlights. I like that grille. Lovely color. You don't really see a whole lot of cars of that beautiful color. The funny thing is, I watched a video not too long ago about car colors and how car colors kind of sort of reflect the economic environment that they're in. So like, when in good economies, when people feel good and there's a lot of consumer confidence and there's not a whole lot of like malaise, you see more colorful cars on the roads, more blues, more yellows and reds and oranges and whatnot. But then in times of stark economic conditions, when people start to be a little bit more Spartan in their choices and trying to be a little bit more modest in their appearance or whatnot, subconsciously, of course. I don't think many people consciously make those kinds of decisions when they try to buy a car. But you start to see more white cars, gray cars, black cars, silver cars, like. It's kind of funny because like it's not scientifically proven or anything. it would be curious to see more in-depth scientific studies based on socioeconomic conditions and predilection for buying a more flamboyant car color. If you look at car colors in Korea, like every car in Korea is either black, white, or silver. Like you don't have really any other options there. And I don't know if that's a reflection of that country's economic condition, but I mean, I think that's something that's, an interesting study, worth studying more of.
But the 240Z looked more modern. It could
And I
beat
like
some
that car.
Porsche 911s or Jaguar E-Types in a drag race, yet cost a lot less. The 1.6 litre from the Datsun 510 was stretched to a 121 horsepower 2.4 litre 6-cylinder that gave the 240Z its name. That sporty body was made from steel, not fiberglass like some of its more exotic competition. That meant it was heavier, but Nissan used thinner steel to try to shave some weight. Inside the car, Nissan continued the sporty look with deep dials and lots of
I like the
gauges,
wheel,
but the car felt cheap.
but
with
after
black vinyl used
exactly after seeing the interior of that 2000 GT, and I know it's a super unfair comparison. It's a big letdown seeing this interior. He just mentioned it, like the cheap vinyl.
The handling was good, but not in the category of some sports cars. But for pure power and enjoyment, it couldn't be beaten at its price point. That price, just $3,500, made it an affordable two-seat Grand Tourer with bags of space for your bags.
So let's do 1970, and then 3500.00. Calculate. So about 25 grand. Man, that's a crazy amount of inflation for that time period. But I mean, 25 grand for that car. So, it's not exactly a cheap car. Not by my standards of cheapness, but relatively affordable for a sports car. If you had money.
And unlike the British sports cars, the 240Z was reliable. And American car makers just didn't make a car that competed with this. They were still making pony and muscle cars like the Camaro or the Mustang. Long waiting lists formed of up to 6 months. Katayama's bet had paid off. The motor critics largely praised this newcomer. Telling words came at the end of a 1970 Road and Track review. We expect to see the Datsun establish a market of its own, one which will force other makers to come up with entirely new models to gain a share in it. The Japanese industry is no longer borrowing anything from other nations. In fact, a great struggle may be ahead just to prevent a complete reversal of that cliche.
Boy, I was about to say prophetic. That basically that alludes to the 1980s, really. I don't know if I want to maybe watch the rest of this some other time. I want to get to the whole purpose of going into that was setting up for why I wanted to watch the donut video. They did announce a new Z. It's been some time since they had a new Z, and they're asking the question: is Nissan back? And I know if you don't really follow automotive news too closely, you're probably going, "Wait, back? Where did Nissan go?" I mean, they still put out cars every year. I see the commercials. I drive by the dealer. That's true, but Nissan has had a rough go of it a bit lately, and they'll probably touch up on it in this video. But it's worth asking if it's positioning themselves to be on the up and up.
One of our favorite car companies of all time has gone through a rough couple of years, to put it lightly. There have been class action lawsuits, recalls, scandals, bad cars, bad blood, and that's not even mentioning the elephant in the boardroom, one Carlos Ghosn.
Great story about that dude.
Final chapter of our Nissan.
I mean, not that I have one. I'm just saying the story about that dude is great.
Failing, how they plan to turn it around, and finally, what we think of the new Z. Will it be enough to bring Nissan back from the brink? We'll see. If you've been following along with our previous installments on the Nissan scandal, you already know that a lot has happened. For anyone who hasn't, I'll try to sum it up real quickly. Ever since the merger between Nissan, Mitsubishi, and Renault way back in the late 90s, there's been some bad blood between Nissan executives and Carlos Ghosn, who was seen as an outsider that didn't understand the Japanese way of doing business. And to their credit, he did a lot of questionable things while managing the giant conglomerate. Most of his decisions paid off and made it possible for Nissan to continue putting out cars, but some choices Carlos made drew criticism within the company and made a lot of people mad. Mass layoffs and cost cutting truly saved Nissan from the brink of bankruptcy, but in the process, the brand became diluted and cheapened. Nissans became the default fleet vehicle because they were dirt cheap, turning a once well-respected brand into somewhat of a joke. Sorry, a juke. Shoddy craftsmanship, plastic parts that broke easily, CVTs, depressing interiors, you name it. If it was gonna save a buck, Nissan did it. While this is ultimately what saved them and made it possible for the cool Nissans we love that came out around this time to be produced, like the 350Z, 370, and GTR, resentment within the company was beginning to grow behind Carlos Ghosn's back. Then in 2018, Carlos Ghosn was arrested
The best
by
story.
Japanese authorities for allegedly underreporting his income by a factor of millions of dollars. From an outside perspective, Ghosn was almost certainly guilty, and Nissan made sure to paint him as a villain in order to save face and prove to investors that the slumping sales were almost certainly because of Ghosn. The new leadership meant a new, profitable direction for the company after many bad fiscal quarters mired in scandal. Well,
I don't know if they'll. Oh wait, they might get to it. I was about to say I don't know if they'll get to it in this video, but it seems like they might get to it now.
while Ghosn was rotting in a Japanese jail awaiting his trial, Nissan cycled through CEO after CEO, each resigning after they couldn't turn the profits around. Then something happened that no one ever saw coming. This part is insane. On a calm night at Japan's Kansai airport on December 30th, 2019, Carlos Ghosn stuffed himself into a box used for transporting audio equipment. You know those big black crates that usually have like a stenciled name on there of like a band you don't really like Imagine Dragons.
Everybody, that's like
with the
that's the second video we watched today where somebody shits on Imagine Dragons, and I gotta say I'm here for it.
help of an American ex-Green Beret and his son, Ghosn was loaded onto a private jet. He had gotten out on bail in March and was still under indictment, unable to leave the country. If he had simply tried to walk through security, he would have been detained immediately. But since the audio box is too big to fit through the X-ray machine, it allowed it to be loaded onto the plane without anyone looking at it. The plane took off close to midnight and landed in Istanbul the next day. From there, Ghosn took a second jet to Beirut, Lebanon, his childhood home, and a country that has no extradition laws with Japan. Worked out. If this sounds like a Hollywood movie to you, you're not alone. There's actually a movie being made about the American ex-Green Beret and his son, starring Oscar winner Sam Rockwell. That's real, and I can't wait for it.
Oh, I love Sam Rockwell.
Rules.
Yeah, he's
so
awesome.
Why did Ghosn flee in the first place if he claims he's innocent? Well, there's something you need to know about Nissan's motive and the Japanese justice system. Japan has a 99.4% conviction rate, meaning
Oof.
almost 100% of people accused of a crime are convicted. That means, theoretically, if Carlos Ghosn went through with the trial, he would have almost certainly been convicted of his crimes and faced jail time. He claimed in interviews he was set up by Nissan execs, and I'll be honest, at first I didn't really believe him. Go ahead, roll that clip. In an interview, Ghosn was quick to point out how, allegedly, Nissan set him up. But after more details came out from leaked internal emails between execs,
All right, this part I'm not aware of. This is news to me. All right, y'all.
truth became clear that there was a conspiracy to frame Carlos Ghosn. We have since apologized to Ghosn and rolled back our accusations because we are human and we make mistakes, and also, he knows ex-Green Berets. I apologize to you, Mr. Ghosn. I'm sorry we passed judgment on you before all the facts came out. Carlos has since been hiding out in Lebanon ever since, giving interviews once in a while to try and clear his name. Meanwhile,
I had
the
no
Japanese
idea about
government
that
is
part.
pressuring Lebanon to rethink the extradition of Ghosn. Needless to say, this international political nightmare wasn't great for business, so Nissan has been taking steps to, let's say, refocus the narrative, introducing their plans to move past it all and focus on what really matters, making their cars good. Nissan unveiled their Nissan Next strategy in 2020 as a plan to take the company into its next chapter and use it like one of those Men in Black memory erasing lights so people forgot about the last 10 to 15 years of Nissan. The plan highlighted a redesign of all that Nissan has to offer, plus upgraded generations, a new Z, and an all-new electric platform. In fact, Nissan...
That new Z looks cool. I'm always bummed out. It's regulations. Safety regulations is why you can't have the front bumper come to that like kind of sharp nose. They always have like the little fender drop off thing that kind of makes it look like a train grill up front. Sometimes it's a cool look. For a Z, it's not the look I want.
Plus upgraded generations, a new Z, and an all-new electric platform. In fact, Nissan CEO Ashwani Gupta said in his presentation that they were using Nissan Next to, quote,
redefine our business, our culture, and our product.
From A to Z. And then he stood in silence for a few seconds as no one clapped, because they didn't understand the alphabet. One of the biggest and most surprising updates is that we're going to see a new Frontier, which hasn't seen a new generation since 2004.
Holy shit.
I mean, you know, they dress it up, make it look nicer, but it's essentially been the same for that long, which is insane. I gotta say, the 2022 Frontier looks great, albeit the capabilities are a little less than its competition, namely the Chevy Colorado or the Jeep Gladiator.
Is it not going to be
It's a
electric?
step in the right direction for a company that is known for taking their sweet time introducing.
If it's not going to be electric, then they're
Like,
already
seriously,
two
it
steps
looks-
behind.
It looks good. It looks really good. Along with the
Looks like an
Frontier,
F-150.
we also got a glimpse at the new updated Pathfinder, which I actually haven't seen yet. Let's see here. That does look good. What's this off-roady one? Yeah, it's just a nice MRI with that. Whoa, Pathfinder, I haven't seen you since before COVID. You've been working out? The 2022 Pathfinder is bigger and bulkier than ever and now can seat up to 8 people. As for EVs, Nissan is making their entry-level electric car, the Leaf, a lot more attractive for ballers on a budget. The range stays about the same at about 150 miles, but the electric motor is more powerful and quick charging ports are now standard. The updated Leaf is actually thousands less than the previous gen. That's right, the base Leaf is more than 4,000 less than the 2021.
That's kinda
Leaf.
cool.
And when you add the $7,500 EV government incentives, it puts the MSRP right above $20,000. That's pretty amazing. Even the high-end trim level, the Leaf S Plus, is only $26,000 after the rebate. That's awesome. This is a pretty sick development considering EVs like the BMW i3, which has the same range, starts at close to $45,000. Nissan
Jesus.
understands how to move forward, especially with electric, and that's evidenced by their new EV, the Aria. Priced at around 40 grand, the Aria electric SUV is taking aim at Tesla's Model Y, although I think it looks a bit cooler.
I think it does. I was about to say.
Akatsuki copper. The specs stack up to the Model Y as well, with 389 horsepower in the performance.
That color is kind of like a compromise. Like I was saying before about not having flamboyant colors like yellows or oranges or reds, and like how silver and white and black are the dominant colors now. Like that copper color is kind of like a compromise. It's like, okay, I'll give you some yellow and some red, but we're gonna put some silver in there too, though. It's still gonna be silver. I like it. It's a little muted for my taste, but I do like it. It's cool. It's a cool color. It's a cool looking vehicle.
Version at top range of 310 miles per charge in the long range trim level. Very cool. Not specific to any one car that Nissan makes, but throughout their whole lineup, interiors are getting upgraded because, let's be honest, the past couple decades, Nissan interiors have been pretty meh. Before this starts to sound like a Nissan commercial, though, I want to reiterate that they maybe tried to frame Carlos Ghosn.
Hello, New York City. I'm Cody Walker, and now it's my great pleasure to introduce for the very first time the all-new Nissan Z.
We've all seen the new Z by now, and overall, it's gotten a great reception from enthusiasts.
I do like the back end of that
The
thing.
Z35 is inspired by basically every gen.
Just for the record, that's the Z that I purchased during COVID. That's the one that's sitting out in my garage, or something similar to that. I don't know if that's specifically the 32, but that's the model.
By basically every generation before it, and you can find styling cues all over the car that prove that. There's the front fascia that was inspired by the original 240.
I love. You can't see it. I don't know why I'm pointing because you can't see, but yeah, that one on the left, man. I love those circular headlights, and I love that grille. You see though how it comes up at the bottom, and on the one on the right, it has that bumper flare that's way down, that extends way further down. Like that's a safety regulation. I would obviously prefer the one on the left, but you know you can't really get away with that anymore. It's a little bit of a bummer, but you know. But even like you see how the body kind of mounds up around the circular headlights, and on the newer model it does it. It's just kind of like flat. I definitely prefer those mounds too. Like that's a very classic look. I don't think that would have anything to do with a safety regulation, but you know, such as the designer's way.
The taillights inspired by the Z30.
I love those taillights. It is funny because like it's inspired by okay, I have a Z31 then. That's what I have. I have a Z31. So it's inspired by the Z32 taillights. I never liked those taillights though. I always thought they were a little weird looking. But I do like them on the new Z. I think they look really cool.
Too. Even the gauge cluster and boost gauge placement is a nod to the old Zs. While this car is respected by old heads and young heads alike, it's beautifully modernized and has something for everyone, and I really love it. As far as the powertrain goes, our suspicions were correct when we guessed it would have the twin-turbo V6 engine from the Infiniti Q50 and Q60. It makes 400 horsepower,
Damn.
hence why people think the Z35 will be called the 400Z. Those 400 horsepower are sent to the rear wheels either through a 9-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual. I just want to say that's awesome. Nissan is still offering new Zs with a third pedal in 2021. Great job, guys. When they said that it would have a manual, I didn't even know that there's a crowd in the audience. This is when the crowd cheered the most. Even Ashwani started punching the air. This shows that even though it might mean more cost to them at the end of the day to offer a manual, they're still willing to give the fans what they want out of this car. Speaking of cost, at a cost of around $40,000, the new Z price is exactly where we predicted it would fall. The optimist in me was hoping for $35,000, but that might have been wishful thinking in retrospect. But the $40,000 price tag falls in line with the $370,000 if you account for inflation. Ashwani said in his presentation that, quote,
The Z has always been an accessible sports car.
and that's true. When the 240 debuted in 1969, it was meant to be an affordable alternative to American sports cars, and that's still true. I'm sure the highest trim will probably be closer to $50,000, but for a 400 horsepower sports car, that's still attainable for a lot of people. I think if I had any criticisms towards the new Z, is that maybe Nissan didn't go hard enough. I don't know, maybe we'll see a refresh where they break away a little bit from the retro styling and start to do something new. Maybe we'll see that in like 5-7 years, or in the case of Nissan, 15 years. Take the Corvette C8, for example, right? Obviously a Corvette, very Chevy, very Corvette, but if you put it next to the C7, it looks a lot different. Chevy took a big swing and it paid off. Everyone wants one of those things. That being said, if anyone from Nissan is watching this, I still think the Z looks amazing. I really want one. It's on my short list of cars to get. Everyone wants one. So overall, the new Z is pretty much as we predicted. Nissan luckily didn't
I would
surprise
definitely
us with
prefer
any
it.
curveballs, so at least for now. There's no doubt in my mind that when the Z goes to market in the US in spring of 2022, it will be in high demand. Most people who are going to buy one will buy a Z regardless of what's in the headlines about Carlos Ghosn or anything related to Nissan. Z fans are hardcore, and from what I've seen so far, the Z35 is a great next chapter.
There's a little nod to the recessed headlights. I would have preferred circular
That up,
headlights.
Nissan. You can use that if you want. Just send the royalties to 6969 Sheesh Street. God damn it. So now that we know what to look forward to with the new Z, what should we see from Nissan in the future? As a Nissan fan, I think the company is taking the correct steps forward when it comes to turning their public image around. There's a lot of history behind that badge. There's a lot of fans that have been turned off over the decisions the company has made over the last few decades. If Nissan can make balanced, reliable cars like they did in the 80s and 90s and stop cutting corners when it comes to things like plastic parts and CVTs and whatnot, they should be able to win over a new group of young enthusiasts that grew up in a time where Nissans were cheap fleet vehicles. Obviously, I do not have a business degree, and this is a total armchair quarterback speak, but I think they're taking the right steps to achieve that goal. Now that the Z's been taken care of, what I would love to see is a new GTR as well. Possibly the biggest complaint you see about Nissan is that they are very late to update models. Think about it. The 370Z was in production for 11 years. Now think about how much technology has advanced from 2008 to 2020. That's way too long, and it's not even the oldest. The GTR, Nissan's halo car and a symbol of their legacy, has been produced in its current state, with minor refreshes here and there and some updates, since 2007. 14 years. I know sports cars don't make a ton of money for car companies, but this car is Nissan. If there were any symbol of a company's vitality,
Oh
this
man,
is it.
I want a
They let it
GTR
come
34 so
stagnant.
bad.
Nissan, if you're listening, use all this interest you drummed up from the Z presentation and your new models to motivate your engineers to design the next GTR. The next generation of car enthusiasts deserves an R36, so they can feel the same excitement we felt watching Godzilla tear up the track back in the day, or talk about how we would improve the livery on Paul Walker's R34.
I forgot that was in the Fast and the Furious.
Else, a benchmark of modern performance printed on a poster that they can hang in their bedroom, assuming kids still do that. I think kids just like lights now, LED lights. I hope Nissan is back, because at the end of the day, I'm a Z boy and I want more fun cars.